Dr. Melanie Garson's here, Associate Professor in the Department of Political Science at UCL and a member of the UCL Centre on US Politics. Melanie, I won't ask your view on parenting, but you're very welcome to offer it if you wish.
No, you're right. Love them, make them happy when they're down, and give them rewards when they do their best.
Yeah, and just make them feel special, because they are special. You know, they're wonderful. Children are great. You know, they really are. But the only reason they're anxious, in my view, is because their parents must be making them anxious, because it's not the natural place that they should be in, really, is it?
Well, it's anybody's game. There's a lot of anxious parents around today.
Yeah.
It probably trickles down.
I know, probably, absolutely right. Let's talk about Donald Trump, talking about anxiety. A lot of people get anxious about Donald Trump. They see him and they go, oh, it's Donald Trump. Donald Trump, let me just give you a couple of stats, right, from his trip to the Middle East, right? In his 4-day trip to the Middle East, he's raised over $2 trillion in capital for the United States of America, $1.4 trillion from the UAE, $600 billion from Saudi Arabia, $500 billion from Qatar. The combined value of all of these investments is larger than the market capitalization of all but 3 public companies in the world, the biggest foreign investment commitment ever raised by a president in US history. Extraordinary, right? I know you and I are going to talk about the peace deal in Turkey and possibly peace talks and all that, but I mean, Trump is killing it right now, isn't he?
Absolutely. I mean, it was like the trade deal, or the trade deal version of Evita's Rainbow Tour, but to the Middle East.
Yeah.
It was absolute, and he was accompanied by, where other people, not military leaders, but all the sort of, if you want, the tech bromacy for want of a better word. You had Altman and Arvind Krishna and Elon Musk and Jensen Huang. They were all with him. And
Elon Musk was there at one point, wasn't he?
Yeah, they were all there, and the objective was to get these deals over the table, as well as the people from Lockheed Martin and Boeing. It was about planes, it was about chips, it was about energy, it was about data centers. It was more than anything else.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting, really, that his entire raison d'etre appears to be, and his strategy appears to be, commerce beats war. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic, which nobody's really done before, and that's why I think he's being successful. And, if he is able to solve the problem in Russia and Ukraine, it will be in a similar way based upon dividends that come from it, rather than actually trying to convince people who hate each other to stop hating each other, because they will always hate each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, because usually you'd think that was, or traditionally in international relations, that was quite the liberalist position. These grand sort of complex interdependence or economics or trade was sort of the linchpin of what you'd think was the liberal order. People think of Trump as quite a realist president. So this is where it creates a little bit of tension, but also some, respect from the other side of the aisle, particularly in the US, until it came down to the plane from Qatar, which sort of troubled a lot of people. But fundamentally, it's about having US interest embedded helps create a stabilization in the world order, and particularly countering China.
Well, that's the thing, and as I say, I mean, rather than the sort of hand-wringing of the people who worry about, who's winning here, who's losing here, is a bully winning, is the victim being sort of punished in some way, if everybody ends up making money and they stop killing each other. And one of the things that people say to me is that Trump often uses the thought process of saying, I can't stand looking at these kids dying. I don't like seeing Russian soldiers being killed every day. Don't like seeing Ukrainian kids being killed every day. A lot of people sort of resonate with that, because they go, yeah, I don't want to see children dying. I don't want to see my children going to war. I'd rather there was a peace dividend. I'd rather there was a peace deal. And he's sort of breaking the mould here of what used to be old-fashioned diplomacy about, we know that you hate each other, we know that you'll probably still fight each other at some point in the next 10 years, but, let's try and make a ceasefire deal work. He's kind of trying to change the way that people think, isn't he?
To a point, I mean, there's been a long-held views in conflict resolution. The more that you can give people incentives to be committed to a deal through that recognition, and Trump has about him an unfailing optimism in this regard, that if you are embedded, if you're earning money, if you're able to take your kids out to for ice cream, you're not going to want to start supporting terrorist regimes. You're going to want to continue the status quo because you're going to be invested in the peace. And he is trying to set the conditions. That's the theory behind the Abraham Accords, which is his big baby. He's trying to really get as many people economically intertwined because they are, the theory that is logically less likely to go to war if it's going to mess with your economy.
Yeah, and I mean, isn't that right though? Because I think we've had many years, and he spoke about it quite broadly and quite accurately. I think in his speaking when he was in Doha, when he talks about the neocons who had been trying to rebuild parts of the Middle East, in Iraq, trying to rebuild places which were perhaps unrebuildable because they wanted to try and impose a kind of a Western value system on a country that really didn't work like that. Rather than actually giving them the opportunity to make money, they were trying to sell them democracy, if you like, when they didn't really want that. And I just find it fascinating that that's where we are now, that you've got a guy like Trump who many people don't like, and I'm not going to pretend to be a disliker of him. I'm not a massive fan of Donald Trump. I'm not a massive fan of anybody, but I'm just quite interested in where the theory of how he's going is coming from.
Yeah, I think, and it's really interesting because I say in some ways he challenges what we would usually perceive to be theories from very different people from Donald Trump, but he does it. And I think it's a respect that is, even within negotiation, acceptance that sometimes you have to operate within people's worldview. Yeah. You cannot always change people's worldview. So how do you then create the linkages? How do you create those golden bridges while still respecting other view and finding commonalities and joint interests that actually can stabilize a relationship and providing those a productive joint interest going forward. Now, I mean, this is all about America first. This is absolutely about making sure America's interests are met. But at the same time, there's accept America's interests are met by being invested in these wider regional stability ventures. Right.
And when it comes to like Vladimir Putin, for example, he's kind of saying, come to the table or else. Don't upset me because I've got a very big, military armour now, which I've surrounded myself with, but I don't really want to use it. But, if you really piss me off, if you'll pardon the expression, I will do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting watching this quiet shift on Ukraine. We were seeing the narrative is quite different from what we saw a few months ago. Obviously, Zelensky had to turn up in Turkey to a point. He can't be seen as not being wanting peace right now. But Trump won't engage, and he said it until he sits down with Putin. But that is, Putin's backed a little bit into a corner right now because he's not going to be able to continue and play the game and what he perceives to be his friendship with Trump unless he starts shifting his position. Yeah,
exactly right. And Trump clearly doesn't see Zelensky as an equal, whereas he does see Putin as an equal. I mean, look at some of the stuff that we've been seeing over the last few days, with Donald Trump being welcomed as he flew in on Air Force One with fighter jets, which were sort of, basically, sort of policing the landing. I mean, it was incredible. Some incredible pictures were coming out. Margot Martin, who I think is part of the White House staff, was taking pictures of the fighter jets, and there was one picture where she was taking a picture of a fighter jet, taking a picture of Air Force One, and there was just incredible stuff. And then, of course, you had the hair swinging for Trump's arrival in the United Arab Emirates. That was just yesterday. Not quite sure what that was all about, but apparently it's a sort of a folky thing that they do in the UAE. I'm going out there soon. I'm wondering if I'm going to get that kind of treatment when I arrive at Dubai Airport. I don't know. Is it what you get? I'm not sure. But let's have a look at what he also said about the US effort in World War II.
For World War I, because we won that war too. But think of it, now, we love France, right? But I think we did a little more to win the war than France did. Do we agree? I don't want to be a wise guy. But when Hitler made his speech at the Eiffel Tower, I would say that wasn't exactly ideal. And I called up the president, Macron, good guy, by the way. Donald, we are celebrating our victory over the Germans. Oh, that's wonderful. No, we don't take credit for what we do. And I said, what the hell? Every country I've spoken to in the last week is celebrating the war but us. Isn't that terrible? So we're going to be doing holidays. But I said it has to be a working holiday because, you can only do so many of them. We have a lot of holidays. I'm not so sure we should have them, and you don't have to go to work. Our country has to go to work.
I mean, you can't really argue with that, can you? It's Macron celebrating the victory over the Nazis. They really didn't win it, did they, the French? Let's face it.
That is, in some ways, we talk about what Trump has that's relatable to all these leaders across the world. He puts it simply and he tells it how it is. Yeah. And that is why you ask why, the jets, and to be given that is the respect that's given to the leadership that these leaders perceive. Well, tells it how it is, and they can, rely on deal making has always been good. Do you trust the person that you shake hands with?
Yeah.
They believe he'll deliver because he tells it how it is.
He does. He really does. And the great thing as well is that the added bonus is it really, really upsets the lefties who really hate him and so much with a passion, but they can't stand the fact that he's being apparently quite successful at the moment. But there we are. Dr. Melanie, thank you very much indeed. Good to see you. Have a great weekend. Dr. Melanie Garson there from UCL, a member of the UCL Centre on News S Politics.